That was so great. Oh, that is so exciting to have these young people up here singing. They are so good and we are so blessed. Well, today we're going to talk about how the universe thinks through you. That you are an integral part of all of mankind, all of universal energy. The energy of the universe grows stronger with you as co-creator. It can't do it alone. It needs you. Now, you've all heard the story about the gardener, and he's working in his garden, and it's so beautiful and so lush and magnificent. And the local minister comes by and he says, "My goodness, look what God hath wrought." And the gardener says, "Oh yeah? You should have seen it when he had it by himself." You know, I love witnessing and being part of the creative process. I love having creative energy channeled through me. I love being the audience when the energy channels through these musicians, or when I read the perfectly written phrase with delicious words. I just love all of it. You know, and each of us is a unique expression in the mind of God, and we express things differently. One of my favorite programs is Project Runway. Does anybody watch that besides me? I am an addict. So what it is these groups are, I don't know how many, it varies, and then it dwindles every week, of course, of aspiring fashion designers, and they have to come up with the same, they're given the same idea, the same material, and they have to each come up with a creative idea. And last week, they had to make a couture fashion out of greeting cards. So there they were, raw, they had the same crappy stuff that they had to work with. And the designs that came forth from these, at that time I think it was 16 designers, would blow your mind. And to me that's just evidence of how we each get to express our creativity in a unique fashion. And this is what we do as co-creators with divine energy. God is not complete without you. The universe has a stake in your decisions. So you ask, how do I get it from here? Well, it's like, how do I get to Carnegie Hall? You practice, practice, practice. Now, when I look at a premise such as this, is how does the universe speaks to you? I always go back to my school and go to the journalistic questions of who, what, when, where, how, and why. And if I write something or I have to think something out, those are always my instinctive guidelines. So it's interesting that these questions begin with who. So you really cannot begin to be a co-creator until you truly understand who you are. You know, in New Thought and metaphysical churches, we all hear the same old cliches, and we, you know, how about you are a divine being having a human experience? That's a good one, but it's the truth. They're all truths, but still they come out so trite and just a blow off. But the world has speeded up, and it's time that you step up to being the fully realized soul that you are. Eric Butterworth talks about who we are as an aspect of God. He talks about we are like drops of water in the ocean, which is with all the aspects of the ocean expressed as this, all in the one drop of water. So in this message, I'm going to get a little far out, and Shirley MacLaine here, so. All right. But that's who I am. Okay. You are a little bit of the God stuff walking around on the face of the earth today. And the planet needs for you to become skilled enough to be a co-creator of the new world. You are necessary, you are integral. So what? The next thing. Since there's really only one reality, your job is to break through the boundaries. As long as you accept the illusion of boundaries, you embed in yourself and in others the illusion that God is remote. It's not remote. God is within. We talked about before of courting God or the divine energy just as you would a lover. You communicate, you notice, you validate, and then one day, just as in a marriage, you find out that you and divine energy are one, just like you find that you and your spouse are one entity. It works like that. And then the evolvement begins. Every time you seek to access more spiritual intelligence, just that intent opens new pathways. Every time you seek to access more creativity, just the intent opens new pathways. Every time you seek more spiritual awareness, just the intent opens new pathways. Okay, where? Now, I believe that every mother comes in equipped with this invisible handbook of wonderful sayings to encourage their children along. Okay, how about this one? Shut the door! Do you think you were raised in a barn? Have you ever heard that? Okay. Put your bonnet on. Do you want to look like a field hand? No. Well, that's when tans and freckles and sunburns were just not the thing. And then dermatologists have proven that true. So chalk that up for mother. But now this is a saying that I believe is right on, right accurate. Bloom where you're planted. And that's where we start, right now, right here, blooming where we're planted. It doesn't matter how little you know, how much you know, this is the beginning of the rest of your life. So this is where you start. Every step you take is on holy ground. It always has been, but now it's time for you to know it and to acknowledge it. When this happens and you come from this point of view, your very vibrations heal your space and radiate out to heal others. Okay, when? Well, that's easy now. This moment, accept that you're more than the physical expression that took on a personality to learn a karmic lesson. Move beyond that thought into grace. The physical world is the domain of karma. When your intent is to start becoming a fully realized soul, you get to move beyond karma. That is just one aspect for one consciousness. There is so much more than that, and you are so much more than that. How? That depends on how much understanding you can cope with. There's always a place to start. A diary of God showing in your life, write it down. Every time you think that God has shown up in your life in just the smallest gesture, start keeping an evidence journal. And then you suddenly look and you realize how much that's the truth for you in your own way, in your own life. How about keeping an evidence journal of every time you have a creative thought that you know is not your physical self, and that you're able to manifest that creative thought? You're channeling divine energy when you do that. It happens every day in even the smallest of ways. If you decorate your home, what decorators call as a touch of the human hand is when something is arranged by the human hand with the unspoken rule of odd numbers, and there it is. What was clutter before now becomes a focal point. You're doing that every day in every way. The way you make a grocery list. These are all creative inputs. So start keeping that evidence journal of your own creativity, and you'd be surprised at how in touch you are. And then when you start realizing this at the smallest level, it just grows. I remember the first time I ever heard of someone healing themselves using this phrase. It was some people from the Edgar Cayce work, and there was a little dinner party, and the lady of the house spilled boiling water on her leg and scalded her leg. So she went back to the bedroom, and they removed the fabric from that leg. And what she said is so simply the truth. The healing power of the Christ is in me now, sufficient for the needs of my body and mind and soul. That God that's present in you right now, that's always present, you just need to trigger it. So that's what she said, and then the other people in the group were in there with her, affirming the same thing. And that's what we do. Just every Sunday in our prayer, we raise our vibrations, and we're coming from the place of God. So, what? Yes, it did. And then I began using that phrase just because I didn't fully understand. Intellectually, I understood God is within and man can heal, and that's the truth of me. But it was an intellectual thing, not a knowing. But if I stubbed my toe, or I twisted my ankle, or I got an oven burn in my hand, I would habituate myself to saying, the healing power of the Christ is in me now, sufficient for the needs of my body, mind, and soul. So even now, if I fall down at home and someone rushes, a family member, are you all right, are you all right? I'm laying there, no, I'm just healing myself. But that's what I'm thinking in my mind, and then I can get up and move on with life. It's funny how this works, how it evolves into becoming a lifestyle. Every lady in this place knows enough about food, knows enough about exercise to become a licensed nutritionist. But you cannot diet until this little brass key that's in your back just turns just a notch, and then one day you are on fire. You've lost 30 pounds. I mean, I lost 30 pounds in 1966. In 1976, I lost that same 30 pounds. But it wasn't until it became a lifestyle that I could maintain a level weight. And this is how the spirituality works. When it becomes an awareness automatically within, then you've turned the corner and become habituated to living the spiritual lifestyle. Why? Well, we're all either in service or in lesson. You can't begin to change the world until you evolve into the in lesson consciousness. In the in-service consciousness, because in my lifetime, I have really wallowed in the in-lesson consciousness. But it's our destiny to change our power. Eric Butterworth talks about praying from God. That's praying from knowing the truth of yourself. And I know that I can fall back, and I know that you can too when you are in a moment, because I receive your prayers, and I pray the same prayers that you're praying, and I am so human when it comes to my children that I'm praying from distress. And when I read your prayers, I know that some of you are coming from distress. That's why we have religious science practitioners and our prayer chaplains, and then even me, when I'm not in concern about my own children, I can pray for you coming from God. For example, when we were on the cruise, and Glenn and I were speakers on the Positive Christianity cruise, I got an email, and my son, my big, healthy football coach son, was in the emergency room to receive a heart procedure. I'm stuck out there in the ocean on a big boat, and I'm helpless. And I just go into panic and frustration. Cherry and David, who are in Colorado today, they were there with me. They were helping me, trying to talk me through everything's going to be okay. And I mean, I'm just as much in panic as any of you when I received those prayers. And so I went to Chris Chenoweth, and he prayed from the knowing and bypassed my distress. So if we can just learn to pray from the knowing of the divine presence. You know, and every Sunday we do this. The highest way that we can pray, or even the highest way that we can conduct life, is to come from the power of knowing that we are each a little bit of God, and knowing and living our divinity. And more than that is to pray, knowing and honoring the divinity of our prayer recipient. You know, we can be, I know that I am part of God, but we forget that the person we're praying for has as much divinity as the Christ, as Jesus the Christ. They have as much within them, and we need to, if nothing else today, I want you to come away with this thought. When we pray, we must pray from a being God mode instead of a begging God mode. Physicists say that reality is non-local. There's no time. Communication is instantaneous. So when we speak our word, it's instantaneous. When we speak our word coming from a place of power, it's instant. We're there. Every particle is connected. And when each of us, as individual expressions from the mind of God, make the step into our power, we lift the fabric of consciousness of our planet, of the universe. Each of us is integral in our part in lifting that up. Can you imagine a big fabric piece of parachute over mankind, and everybody's hunched down like this, and then as one person's consciousness pops up, that's lifted, that's lifted, that's lifted, and pretty soon everyone's lifted. The following statement comes from Reverend Angela Peroff. She says, "These questions ground the great work of modern mastery. The universe is collaborating uniquely with each individual now. It is time to jump, to fly, to believe enough to leap past what Earth can comprehend without a single doubt. This is where we are as a group consciousness attending this church. It's time for us to leap up and take charge, because we already have the power within us. We just need to turn that little brass key a notch to know that we are part of the divine, part of the God stuff walking the face of the earth today. So this is where we are now. It's time to become conscious co-creator, to remember our noble beginnings and to hone our skills and be what we were meant to be. And so it is.